Thank you. Hello, I'm Simon Longstaff from the Ethics Centre, and I'd like to welcome you all here tonight to Sydney's City Recital Hall in Angel Place for the latest Intelligence Squared debate to come from Australia. Before we proceed, what I'd like to do is to pay my respects, and I hope on your behalf as well, our respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, to acknowledge their elders past and present. We've come here tonight to debate whether racism is destroying the Australian dream. And this Australian dream is something which is absolutely magnetic. It's the land of opportunity, of peace, safety, and a legendary fair go. And as ever, it still appeals to people seeking a better life from around the world. But our history and recent events tell a different story. From colonisation and a federal constitution that excluded our Indigenous people, to the removal of their children, to ethnic tensions that have erupted into violence from time to time, to the current debate about race of a sports star and a former Australian of the Year. All of this is part of a narrative of racism that is a constant thread woven into the fabric of our society in Australian life. So tonight we're debating the motion that racism is destroying this Australian dream. And to speak for the motion, we're joined by Stan Grant, a famous Australian news anchor, Pallavi Sinha, university lecturer and immigration lawyer, and debating against the motion, Rita Panahi, columnist for the Herald Sun, one of Australia's largest newspapers, and Jack Thompson, Australian film icon and star of many movies, including Star Wars and The Man from Snowy River. Please welcome them all. Welcome. Now, after we've heard from the speakers, we're going to hear the results of the opinion poll that was taken just before this debate began. And then after that, we'll open the debate to the floor. And as you've heard, there's a chance for you to make a statement, ask a question, to really add some pepper to the debate. And then during the question and answer session, we'll be running a second poll, a formal poll, to see how the teams have influenced your position. But now we move to the opening speakers, and first speaking for the motion will be Stan Grant. Stan, if I can introduce him, is a journalist and a news anchor. He's an Aboriginal Australian descending from the Wiradjuri people of central New South Wales, where his father is an elder. Stan has recently published a series of pieces on the Aboriginal experience of racism. Speaking in the debate that racism is undermining the Australian dream, please welcome Stan Grant.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming along this evening, and I would also like to extend my respects to my Gadigal brothers and sisters from my people, the Wiradjuri people. In the winter of 2015, Australia turned to face itself. It looked into its soul and it had to ask this question: who are we? What sort of country do we want to be? And this happened in a place that is most holy, most sacred to Australians. It happened on the sporting field, it happened on the football field. Suddenly the front page was on the back page, it was in the grandstands. Thousands of voices rose to hound an Indigenous man, a man who was told he was an Australian, a man who was told he was an Australian of the Year. And they hounded that man into submission. I can't speak for what lay in the hearts of the people who booed Adam Goodes, but I can tell you what we heard when we heard those boos. We heard a sound that was very familiar to us. We heard a howl. We heard a howl of humiliation that echoes across 2 centuries of dispossession, injustice, suffering, and survival. We heard the howl of the Australian dream, and it said to us again, "You're not welcome." The Australian dream. We sing of it and we recite it in verse. Australians all, let us rejoice, for we are young and free. My people die young in this country. We die 10 years younger than average Australians, and we are far from free. We are fewer than 3% of the Australian population, And yet we are 25%, a quarter of those Australians, locked up in our prisons. And if you are a juvenile, it is worse, it is 50%. An Indigenous child is more likely to be locked up in prison than they are to finish high school. I come from the people west of the Blue Mountains, the Wiradjuri people, where in the 1820s, the soldiers and settlers waged a war of extermination against my people. Yes, a war of extermination. That was the language used at the time. Go to the Sydney Gazette and look it up and read about it. Martial law was declared and my people could be shot on sight. Those rugged mountain ranges, my people, women and children, were herded over those ranges to their deaths. The Australian dream. The Australian dream is rooted in racism. It is the very foundation of the dream. It is there at the birth of the nation. It is there in terra nullius, an empty land, a land for the taking. And when British people looked at us, they saw something subhuman, and if we were human at all, we occupied the lowest rung on civilization's ladder. We were fly-blown Stone Age savages, and that was the language that was used. By 1901, when we became a nation, when we federated the colonies, we were nowhere. We're not in the Constitution, save for race provisions, which allowed for laws to be made that would take our children, that would invade our privacy, that would tell us who we could marry and tell us where we could live, the Australian dream. In 1963, when I was born, I was counted among the flora and fauna, not among the citizens of this country. Now, you will hear things tonight, you will hear people say, but you've done well. Yes, I have, and I'm proud of it. And why have I done well? I've done well because of who has come before me. My grandfather, who served to fight wars for this country when he was not yet a citizen and came back to a segregated land where he couldn't even share a drink with his digger mates in the pub because he was black. My great-grandfather, who was jailed for speaking his language to his grandson, my father, jailed for it. That's the Australian dream. I have succeeded in spite of the Australian dream, not because of it, and I've succeeded because of those people. You might hear tonight, but you have white blood in you, and if the white blood in me was here tonight, my grandmother, she would tell you of how she was turned away from a hospital giving birth to her first child because she was giving birth to the child of a black person. The Australian dream. We're better than this. We are an extraordinary country. We are in so many respects the envy of the world. If I was sitting here where my friends are tonight, I would be arguing passionately for this country. But I stand here with my ancestors and the view looks very different from where I stand. The Australian dream. We have our heroes. Kathy Freeman lit the torch for the Olympic Games, but every time we are lured into the light, we are mugged by the darkness of this country's history. Of course racism is killing the Australian dream. It is self-evident that it's killing the Australian dream. But we are better than that. The people who marched across the bridge for reconciliation, they are better than that. The people who supported Kevin Rudd when he said sorry to the stolen generations, they are better than that. My children and their non-Indigenous friends are better than that. My wife, who is non-Indigenous, is better than that. And one day I want to stand here and be able to say as proudly and sing as loudly as anyone else in this room, Australians all, let us rejoice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stan. Rita Panahi is a Herald Sun columnist and broadcaster who takes on many subjects, including Australian culture, politics and immigration. Rita herself is a migrant Australian, born in America to Iranian parents. Please welcome Rita Panahi.
That was very powerful, Stan. I appreciate being here to hear it. I've got to say, when I was first asked to take part in this debate, my response was rather blunt. Why in God's name would I want to be the token conservative in a room full of self-loathing lefties? Yet, here I am, talking about whether racism is destroying the Australian dream, a topic that I find utterly absurd. I've often wondered why so many in this country, a country that is so wonderfully cohesive and inclusive in 2015, are desperate to paint it as some racist backwater. Where else but in Australia and New Zealand will you find greater harmony among different races and religions? By any sensible measure, we are a truly tolerant country. As a migrant to this country, a non-Christian, obviously non-white Middle Eastern migrant, I'm enormously proud to call myself Australian. Have I faced racism? Yes, I have, on the rare occasion. But let's be clear, racists in this country today are the tiny minority of ignorant bottom feeders. They are powerless and their bigotry is typically born out of jealousy. They're the types who blame migrants for taking their jobs and their opportunities instead of getting off their lazy asses and working. It's not state-sanctioned racism. It is not condoned by the majority. Indeed, it is reviled by the majority. We do have random, isolated incidents that are blown up and endlessly examined. You can have one drunk bogan yelling some obscenity on a train, and it ends up on YouTube and ends up on the news, and then you have dozens of tortured field pieces written about it, and we end up having televised debates about it. We even have campaigns for racism that never even occurred, like the harebrained "I'll ride with you" hashtag that was trending while innocent people were still being kept hostage at the Lindt Cafe in Sydney. The I'll ride with you phenomenon was synonymous with the type of self-congratulatory moral posturing we've come to expect from social media. The lazy clicktivism of the jerk circle who think they're saving the world by one hashtag at a time. Now we have a term called Islamophobia, used to silence debate. I think Christopher Hitchens said it best when he described Islamophobia as a word created by fascists and used by cowards to manipulate morons. Labelling people racist has become a favourite pastime among some, so much so that it's beginning to lose all meaning. We have become so hypersensitive that any criticism, no matter how justified, can be called racist. Instead of encouraging critical thinking, I feel there's this atmosphere of censorship where discourse is silenced. Even Germaine Greer, for God's sakes, is now the focus of the hate police who say she's too offensive to be heard. I never thought I'd be standing up here defending Germaine Greer, but I am. She should have every right to speak at a university. I don't agree with her point of view on transgender people, but she's got every right to make it. And this atmosphere we've created where certain opinions are acceptable and certain ones aren't, and you're deemed racist immediately without any examination of what you're actually saying. Of course there's some racists in Australia, as there are everywhere in the world, but here their numbers are few and they're utterly disempowered. The bigotry that threatens the Australian dream isn't racist attitudes. It's the bigotry that seeks to silence and smear. It's the bigotry of low expectations, which refuses to call out abhorrent behaviour because of cultural sensitivity. It's the bigotry that seeks to wrap capable, empowered people in the cloak of victimhood. It's the bigotry that sees easily outraged Western feminists turn a blind eye to brutal misogyny seen in Islamic countries, as well as abhorrent practices much closer to home. We seem to have drifted into a worrying trend where self-appointed ethical guardians display a puritanical fervour to ban things they deem offensive, no matter how misplaced or overblown their defence may be. This renewed zeal for imposing one's viewpoints by stealth is not something to be celebrated. There's no virtue in being easily offended. Being hypersensitive doesn't make you more sensitive or a better person. It typically just makes you a massive bore. A free and sophisticated society must allow citizens to offend and to be offended without contravening any laws. If someone is not inciting violence or defaming an individual or group, then why should their right to free speech be infringed upon? As a wise man once said, when you restrict the freedom to criticise and ridicule, you create a society with a veneer of tolerance, concealing a snake pit of unaired and unchallenged views. In 2015, oppressing free speech and open discourse is a far greater threat to the Australian way of life and the Australian dream than racism.
Thanks, Rita. Pallavi Sinha is an immigration and family lawyer. She's a second-generation Indian Australian. Pallavi works with the New South Wales Anti-Discrimination Board. And you're going to be able to spot her soon in a film called Un-Indian, which is a new Bollywood film about love and race, starring legendary Australian cricketer Brett Lee. Please welcome Pallavi Sinha.
Ladies and gentlemen, I disagree with my colleague Rita. This topic is not absurd. People who feel racially vilified or discriminated are not hypersensitive, and Australia is not the tolerant society that we describe it to be. In fact, I don't even like the word tolerant, because we should be embracing people from different cultures. We're all migrants, in fact. We all came here either with the First Fleet, or we came here, or our ancestors came here by plane. And it is this denial and jest which is actually part of racism itself. It is at the heart of the problem of racism. Denial is at the very heart of racism. Australia should and can be a land of equal opportunity for all, but it is not, because racism is destroying this aspiration. It is a point of agreement that racism exists, but the question we are considering today is not about whether Australia is more racist than other countries. The question is more narrow and precise, and it is whether or not racism is destroying the Australian dream, whether Australians are being treated equally and given the same basic levels of safety, protection, and opportunity to ensure that we all get a fair go. Stan told you about the Aboriginal perspective and evidence of the numerous ways in which they have and continue to be treated unequally. I've heard of people who don't even get job interviews unless they change their name from Singh to Smith or Wong to Wickham. This is Australia we live in today, and it is not about giving people a fair go. They are not the lazy asses that my colleague decided to describe them as. They are hard-working, aspiring Australians who want to contribute to the Australian society, but they are not even given a job interview because of the way their name sounds. This is not a country where people are even being treated adequately or treated respectfully and protected adequately by the law. Why is it that a preacher can make statements like, we should do a jihad on the Jews, but the Anti-Discrimination Act is not able to protect them? And it was only a few months ago that protesters from Reclaim Australia are at the centre of violent scenes, particularly in Melbourne. And just a short distance from where we are today in Martin Place, Australians were draped in Australian flags and in some cases dressed as ancient Greek soldiers. And the Party for Freedom, inverted commas, has now announced that it will hold a Cronulla Riots memorial service. The advertisement for this event was removed by Facebook one day after it was advertised. The group has described the rally as a fitting time to bury multiculturalism. So much for a successful multicultural society. Yes, there are examples of successes, but these are the exceptions. And such rallies only add fuel to any fires of division and tear our community apart. Constructively expressing views is one thing, but violent gatherings are another. This does not create an atmosphere where all Australians feel safe to roam the streets or let alone catch public transport. There are numerous examples of racist incidents occurring on our public transport, and people don't feel safe to catch a train or a tram anymore. This has led to a culture of fear rather than a culture of feeling welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, racism in Australia is increasing and it's destroying the Australian dream. This means that our resources are not adequately tapped into, and this then has a detrimental effect on Australia as a whole. I urge you to use your hearts and minds to make the right vote for Australia today.
Jack Thompson's a celebrated Australian film icon, an actor born in Sydney, who is known for what many consider to be his portrayal of the quintessentially Aussie character in movies like The Man from Snowy River and, of course, Wake in Fright. Please welcome Jack Thompson.
I have listened to what's been said passionately about the racism in our society. Let's examine this concept of an Australian dream. The Indigenous dream that was being lived when we arrived here was almost totally destroyed by our arrival. And Stan has presented eloquent evidence of just what that meant. We have been racist from very early. But what Stan didn't mention was that that racism was already inherent in us. It was what brought a lot of us here. Every time you hear an Irish joke, that's a racist joke. It's a joke at the expense of the Celts, who were considered so inferior to the Anglo-Saxon that from around 1750 through, even right through to 1900, there was an incredible diaspora of the Celtic people from the British Isles. They were less than. They were the result of an institutionalized and rationally argued racism. But this dream that we speak of is in fact itself a racist dream. You can be a part of us, this wonderful world in which I'll let you be equal, brother. I remember growing up with evidence of this racism that I inherited, this empire that I was a part of. It's our history. It's who we are. We are living a denial of our history. We are living a denial of the racism that is inherent in our lives. Yes, you're welcome here. Yes, you were made welcome. Yes, Rita, you were given a wonderful opportunity. And yes, Stan, we have been involved in great racial atrocities. We learned that from those who came before us and who handed it on in nursery rhyme and attitude and then said it must not be spoken of. It isn't racism that's ruining whatever Australian dream there may be. And as I said, I suggest that dream itself is a racist dream. It is that censorship. It is that denial. And as Pallavi said, the subject of the debate is quite definite, quite narrow. Is racism destroying the Australian dream? It's not racism. It's our denial of that endemic and institutionalized racism. And until we teach our children the history of who we are, that dream is not really possible. And they will be denied a future in which they can honestly say, there is an Australian dream, and I'm part of it.
Well, gosh, you've heard some really passionate arguments now, and oh, thank you. In a moment, we'll be opening up to the floor, and I'd encourage you to take up Rita's invitation. There are no comments, there are no conversations off limits here today. But before we do that, let's hear what the result of the poll before the debate was undertaken happened to be. Before the debate went underway, there was 24% of people still undecided, so that's a pretty big margin to be won on this question. And 26% were against the motion, and 50% were for of it. So,
I'm not buying any of that.
Yeah.
No one buys that.
so
No one.
well,
What was Jack saying about denial?
anyway.
The river in Africa.
Rita, you might want to take some comfort that you could win all 24% and more on that basis. So stay optimistic about this and see whether your arguments have swayed people. Anyway, there's a lot to be won for in terms of the result, and I suppose on your side, a lot to be lost. You can ask a question, or if you want to, you can make your own speech in defence of a view one way or the other. And while that's coming down, I want to go to Rita's comment. She was saying, look, really, if you look at the state of affairs in Australia, for the vast majority of people, including migrants, it is not a terrible experience, as you described. Am I stating correctly what you had to say?
I think there's a reason why we are a desirable destination for people who do want a better life. If it was such a horrible, intolerant place where dreams were being destroyed willy-nilly, I don't think you'd have people risking their lives to be here. I find, like I said at the start, I find the whole debate absurd in this day and age. I know we've got shameful episodes in our history. I can't think of a nation that doesn't. Right. But if we're talking about here and now, I think we've got a lot to be proud of.
Can we just stop this idea of history? Can we knock that on the head right now? We held an inquiry into the stolen generations, the Bringing Them Home report, 15 years ago, which led to Kevin Rudd's apology. One of the recommendations was that we must stop taking children, and if we take children, try to keep them in their culture.
Okay, let's...
No, let me just finish that point, because since that day, the number of children taken has increased by 400%. This is not history. Let's forget about that.
So let's hold this for a moment, because I want to throw it open to the floor first. Okay. So we'll start down here, please. If you could just say your name and...
Mick Grushi. I'm a first-generation Australian. Australia, drive it like you stole it. Well, I wonder, the whole idea, Uncle Jack, thanks for your comments on what racism is. I think it's actually history. It's our history. Well, the question is, what is the dream? And is the dream still ruled by money and economic imperatives as opposed to human?
Thank you. And we'll now go to down the front here.
A commentator described this country as comfortably racist. In other words, what he was saying was that there's a notion out there called casual racism, where subliminal comments are made which denigrate a group or a people on the basis of their identity. So, for example, during the World Cup cricket recently, a television commentator was interviewing Indian cricket fans and asked them who's minding the 7-Eleven stores while they're watching the cricket. Adam Goods, to whom Stan Grant referred, was suggested that he should launch King Kong and draw your own conclusions, all of which perpetuate negative stereotypes and give permission to racists to peddle their poison. So I suggest that there's no simple answer, yes it is or no it is not destroying the Australian dream. But all freedoms come with responsibilities. That includes freedom of speech. So whether it is or isn't destroying the Australian dream, it certainly is damaging the Australian dream. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And we'll take one more in this round from up the back there on the left side. Yes.
Hi, Ellie Chapman. My question sort of relates to the first question. I just wanted to get clarity around what you all defined the Australian dream. I just don't think it was necessarily clear in all your arguments.
Yeah, thanks. And I think we might just go across there. What is the Australian dream? So we'll each have a go. Jack, I think your sense of it is that it's something which is sort of imbued with a kind of imperialism which just runs through the whole country. Is that right? Or is
It is partly. I think that the Australian dream is kind of fairly airy-fairy. You ask for a definition of it because it's very difficult to find a definition of it. The great Australian dream was that everyone would have a quarter acre, you know, and then there's the Australian dream. But we very early said, and you said at the beginning, the Australian dream that we're discussing is one that sees where Australians see themselves and their culture as being the land of opportunity and fair go and open-heartedness and open-mindedness. And I actually haven't ever lived in that country.
Right. Rita?
I've lived in a pretty fair income country. I've lived in a country where you can have a go, but you better have a bloody go. But I don't know this dream. I think it is a dream. I think it's more than a dream. I think it's a fantasy.
Pallavi?
The Australian dream, which I was referring to, it's not a fantasy, it is a reality. People can be given a fair go. That's why in countries like Canada, in the last election, the number of Canadians more than doubled in Parliament. Whereas in Australia, we only have one Anglo-Indian elected to federal parliament, and she's not going to be re-elected because of the ranking that she's been given on her ticket. It is possible to give people equal opportunities and to give them a chance, but if there is denial, and if there is this constant, oh, well, this is casual, this is a joke, and it's not acknowledged, well, then we will not be getting equal opportunities. And the status quo of people having to change their names to get a job interview, that will keep going.
Rita, I mean, that was a point that's raised. I mean, this change. I mean,
Sorry, I treat that with absolute disdain, people changing their names to get jobs, as if that's common practice in Australian society. I mean, what sort of a bloody joyless, censored society do we want to live in when you can't even make jokes about Italians and the mafia, for the love of God? You know what? Be offended. But you have no right to shut down someone's freedom of speech because you're offended. We're not little petals here.
Is there an epidemic of censorship that I've missed? Rita, your articles are never shut down.
Well, no,
is there a
Bolt does
where
have
are these
articles
people?
that have
Where
been
are these
censored.
people being silenced? Come on, get real, Rita.
come on.
Get real.
So
now
we're
listen.
going to cherry pick a couple of
the Australian
conservatives.
dream, whatever the Australian dream is, it has never been our dream. Indigenous people are not on the front bench of the High Court. Indigenous people, until now, 100 years plus after Federation, we finally had an Indigenous person on the front bench of a major party. We're not running our major corporations. We're not chief surgeons in our hospitals. Oh, for God's sake, I've been the only one on television news for 20 years. I mean, come on. So the Australian dream exists in our imagination. It's the beach, it's the bush, it's Bradman, it's a fair go, it's tolerance, it's mateship. And you know what it's been for us? What it's been for us, sadly, and I hate to sound like the office bore, but it has been dispossession, it's been severed heads, it's been poisoned water holes, it's been children taken. That's been the Australian dream. It hasn't been a dream for us.
Well, yes, down the front here.
My name's Lauren, and aren't we supposed to be a multicultural country? And we're not even letting refugees into our country, and we're denying them. Aren't we denying them the Australian dream?
Okay, thank you. Up the back.
Thank you. My name's Freddie Sharp. I was surprised that no one on the panel mentioned the changing political climate in which today we actively condone, if not encourage, racism. Migrant societies like Australia are paradoxically often the most xenophobic and often the most racist, because each arrival wants to close the gates and climb the slippery pole. And for years in Australia we had an unwritten political agreement that we would not play the race card. Ever since John Howard in Tampa 2001 played that race card, right through to George Brandis saying last year, we have the right to be bigots, we have broken that rule, we have unleashed the demons and opened the Pandora's box. So when can we expect strong leadership from our politicians on this crucial matter of national identity?
Okay. And one last one down here, and then we'll go back to the panel.
Thank you. Just a quick something to Rita, first of all. You're in denial, love. Macquarie University repeated a study done in the US where they gave out duplicated resumes, thank you, to jobs, some with Anglo-Saxon names, others with ethnic names. Guess who got the jobs? Guess who got the interviews? And it was very clear, an exact repeat of what happened in the United States. You can deny that all you like, but the research is there.
Okay, so there was one study done that I haven't seen, and I find your attitude a little bit patronising, telling me I'm in denial. You know what? In fact, I'm going to call you racist because you're denying my experience. No, I'm not really. I'm not calling you racist, but, you know, I could do that.
I'm just quoting the research. Okay,
That no one's seen.
My name's Cheryl. I was born in New Zealand, so I'm an immigrant.
Someone from New Zealand. Now we've got problems.
I've spent 1/3 of my life in Australia, and I just also wanted to address what Rita said about Australia and New Zealand being an example of sort of low racism in the world. I'd have to say that I don't think you can compare the two countries. When I was in school, Maori culture and Maori language was compulsory. There had been preschools that spoke Maori language and immersed children in Maori culture since the 1950s. Maori language is so prevalent in New Zealand society now, all government documents are printed in Maori as well as English. And all people in New Zealand speak with Maori language throughout their language.
Okay, so the point of this is
that,
really...
well, Rita was, so I'm saying Australia is not as non-racist as New Zealand by a long shot.
Okay, so the point, I'll have to pull you up there. So the central point is, I think at this point is, A, you're in denial, and B, that New Zealand is better than Australia when it comes to this. Thank you.
My name's Nick Cater. I am an immigrant to this country from the UK. I simply don't recognise the country that's being discussed here tonight. I came to this country because it was a country of great opportunity, a country that rewarded you for what you did, what you contributed, not for who you were, not for what class you came from. I feel passionately, as Stan does, about our Aboriginal people in this country. I too have visited communities in Central Australia and am appalled at the conditions that I see there. I want those people too to be given the opportunities of education, the opportunity to participate in this economy, to grow wealthy in this economy like the rest of us.
Can I just come in on that? Because you were making a very good point. I want to just come back to something that Rita said before, that she's the only conservative here, that we're all lefties. I consider myself a conservative. I don't want government. I don't want government in my life. I don't want Indigenous people want less government in their life as possible. We want the right to make our decisions for ourselves as much as possible. We don't want bureaucrats dictating our outcomes. I've been able to do what I've done in my life because my father got off and he worked and he gave me opportunity. And Rita, you're right, you can grasp that opportunity. But why is it so much more difficult for us? And Nick, you've seen those communities and I hear what you're saying.
But there's also a fact he's pointing out. He's saying if you look at the stories of success, I take it it's true that there are many people who've come from a migrant background of all sorts of different kinds who've been successful. So something must be conceded to that.
I don't question that the Australian dream is there to be grasped by people, and Nick's right. It is a place of opportunity. It is an extraordinarily cohesive place. I've seen the worst of the world, and this is not it. But the racism that goes to the heart of this country, the racism that this country was built on, the lie that we were not human and had no rights to this, we have not emerged from that in 200 years. And because I've done well, or Adam Goodes has done well, does not negate the fact that the majority of our people occupy the lowest rung on the ladder in Australia 200 plus years later. We have cured polio and we can't fix poverty for less than 3% of the population. We are not real.
No. I said this has been a massive focus of governments from both sides. It's not an easy solution. Everyone knows that's a significant issue. Everyone wants to fix it. Billions of dollars have gone into it. And
Billions of dollars have gone to bureaucrats. Billions of dollars have gone to policy. Billions of dollars have not come to us. And when you have less than 3% of the population, and our former Prime Minister says if you choose to live on your land and make your life in your country, that you're making a lifestyle choice and you may have your community shut down. In 2015, Nick, Conservatives don't want government telling us what to do in our lives.
And Jack, I need to get a view from you in a sec, but first of all, Pallavi.
Yeah, look, I congratulate you, and I just want to comment and say that it's great that you feel welcome in coming to Australia. And there are success stories. My father's in the audience today, and he's done well, but they are not the majority. And what we are debating today is whether or not racism is destroying the Australian dream in terms of what is happening with the majority of Australians. If almost half the population is born overseas or has a parent born overseas, yet this is not reflected in governments, in media, in high positions in politics, well, that is definitely not equal opportunities being afforded to all people. And national identity is a very good question that someone raised earlier. And it is about respecting one another. It is about people being given the opportunity to advance if they work hard. It's got to be about hard work, work for toil, like the actual Australian anthem talks about, that we should be able to work hard and then get to where we want to in life. And freedom, yes, I have nothing against freedom of speech. We've got Rita, who has her own column. If freedom of speech was being censored, they wouldn't be allowed to have TV programs and she wouldn't be allowed to have a column. But it comes... Or even more than that.
Are you for real? Are you for
If
real?
we were being censored, you would not be allowed to have a column.
You are
So
amazing me.
I have my own point of view and I would like that to be respected.
I think the point is that there are people who struggle to be heard, and some of them are in the audience right now. So I'm going to go upstairs here, and then I'm going to come back down here. But up there, yes, please.
I wanted to point out to Jack Thompson that I do believe that denial that racism exists is indeed the epitome of racism. And I think perhaps we have some confusion as to what is racism and what is the Australian dream. And in actual fact, perhaps what is destroying the Australian dream is indeed that we are rather confused about it, and it's the lack of leadership that we have shown by our government, and the fact that we're all rather comfortable, fat and happy, that perhaps we feel we don't need one anymore.
I said that's the way we are as a challenge.
Do you
It
see
is the way we are, and we can do something about it. And it relies on education. The only thing I disagree about your comment is that you look to the leaders, whoever they may be, to decide what our future will be. It has to be decided by us, among ourselves. We need to understand that this is a debate worth having and a discussion important to have with our children.
Thank you.
I don't think in our rush to redefine Australia in the future that we should throw off the British foundations of what became modern Australia so easily. There are some very good things that came with Britain. British law, it took them 200 years, but British law enabled this country to see the lie of terra nullius. The High Court was able to overturn that lie that justified the theft of our land because British law allowed it. Let's not throw off what is the British tradition and the British foundation, but let's enlarge it. Let's have a bigger view of who we are. Let's reach back to 60,000 years and let's reach forward to the latest people who come here. This is what the Australian dream could be.
When I listened to Rita, I heard her concede that there is incidents of racism, that there are people who she believes appropriately are allowed to express what she would probably consider herself to be obnoxious views, but that you can't generalise from the exceptions, this minority, to say that the whole of the country is having its idea of its better self being destroyed. Isn't that a pretty persuasive argument to you when you look at the whole scope of Australian society?
Well, it does detrimentally affect the whole nation as a whole. Some of the best and brightest people who study here are leaving. It's a fact. Rita talked about high rates of immigration. I know the heads of Chinese and Indian associations who are saying that the reason for that is they don't get the same job opportunities as other people here. So we are then actually losing the best and brightest, and that's not good for Australia as a whole by any means.
Okay, let's go to the lady here, down here.
Hi, I myself come from South Africa, where racism was legislated, entrenched. The picture you paint of Australia bears no resemblance to that of South Africa. And Stan, I think I almost had tears listening to what you had to say, and I do not deny what has happened and what still happens. But to say that racism is destroying, I can't really define the dream, but is destroying Australia, I just have to say firmly no.
Yeah. Of course. Great points. Up the top.
Ottilia, I'm French and not even Australian, so sorry for my accent. I work for the New South Wales government with a Korean, a South African. My boss is Aboriginal for Armidale. So in that respect, I find that Australia has really achieved, like a very fairly cultural integration. However, where I think it has failed is in the fact that the government has still and needs to install positive quotas for the Aboriginal people for them to be able to have a place to work and to earn their money, rather than, as New Zealand are doing and are performing very well, doing a massive ACA on the rugby field, and that's a pity.
Thank you. We may not be quite so keen on the haka, depending on various sporting events. Yes, down here, and then we'll come over this side. Your
I'm
name?
a GP working in inner suburbs of Sydney. And in my experience, Australia is the best country of the whole world that we live in. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie! That should be the symbol of our pride.
Okay.
That should be multicultural society, appreciate that, yes, racism has no place, but if you compare from other countries, the racism over here is almost nothing.
Thank you very much. And you did a great Aussie, oi, oi, oi. Yes, down the front.
Hi, my name is Min Lee, and I'm Canadian. I've been here 2 months, and I can say that Sydney is a beautiful multicultural city that's very inclusive for the most part. When I first arrived, I arrived on the Gold Coast, and unfortunately I can't say the same through my experience. You guys are an amazing people, an amazing country, but I think that Canadians are much more inclusive when it comes to different ethnicities. Like, for instance, when I walk around in my city, Montreal, Toronto, I've lived in both cities. People ask you, oh, what nationality are you? Where are you from? Where are your parents born? And I notice being in Australia, nobody asks.
Okay.
And they just assume.
Yeah, just quickly, because I think we're on Canadian time at the moment, which is a slightly longer 26. So this is a response to Rita.
Look, I have the
to go to
same
floor.
experience because I look a little bit different. People are always asking me, what's your background, But I also know people who do also look different, who've got ethnic backgrounds, who get really offended when people ask them. They say, that makes me feel like I'm not part of Australia. I was born here. Why are people asking what my heritage is? I'm Australian. So it's funny that one measure that you actually see as being inclusive, someone else sees as actually being very discriminating and as setting them apart. So this is what I'm talking about. Sometimes we are looking to be offended. We are looking to be for racism that may not exist.
Okay.
Acknowledging differences.
Thank you, Rita.
Shouldn't be a freaking crime.
We've got up here, yep.
Racism is about prejudice, and to prejudge is when you prejudge, it's a definition that you do so with minimal information. And I think information and ignorance is really at the key of where Australia is developing its dialogue. And I think that's because there's a lowbrow media, there's a political class that show no leadership. in terms of infighting. I would call the political class misogynist as well. But fundamentally, where I congratulate you here is it's quite rare to find an intellectual debate in Australia of such depth. Unfortunately, it's too rare, almost as rare as an England rugby win. So I congratulate you on that. So.
Okay, thank you, sir. And a final brief comment from you, Jack Thompson.
I finally get the last word. I've listened with great interest to the debate to and fro. I really believe that we can achieve what it is we aspire to. And I really believe we can do it because we do come from a community, a culture of people who believe that there is such a thing as the fair go, who believe that there is such a thing as equal opportunity. We have this dream, this fantasy, this aspiration, and we can do something about it, and we must embrace the possibility that we can and go ahead changing our legislation to include the Indigenous people, changing our aspirations so that they include us all, and educating our children to a future that we can all embrace.
Thank you. You know, it may be a delusion, but just imagine if it wasn't. Just imagine if it could be made true here. What an achievement that would be. Well, look, before we go to the final poll figures and reveal the formal result of the debate, which in a sense there'll be winners and losers, but before we get to that, can you please join with me in thanking all of our speakers, Stan Grant, Pallavi Sinha, Rita Panahi and Jack Thompson. Thank you so much. So, we come to the results. Now, just let me remind you of what the pre-debate poll was. Before we heard anything at all, the vote for the motion was 50%, against 26%, and undecided a whopping 24%. So, after the debate, for the motion that racism is destroying the Australian dream... Sorry, the suspense is getting the better...
I'm at the edge of my seat.
Actually, 10% are still undecided, which is really interesting. No, because normally it's much smaller than that. 26% is against the motion, but the vote for the motion has increased to 64%, and I declare the motion carried. Congratulations to all of those who spoke for the motion. They also got the swing, but a big thank you to you, the audience, for your participation and for joining us tonight. Give yourself a round of applause. It's an important topic. Thanks again to our wonderful speakers, and from me, Simon Longstaff from the Ethics Centre, I'd like to say good night to everyone from the Angel Place, in the City Recital Hall, Angel Place, here in Sydney. Good night.